So WLab is a community based out of Hong Kong, and our goal is really to co-create a happy and healthier Hong Kong. But we're also looking beyond Hong Kong. We're really looking into what makes cities, what makes spaces really happy and healthy. So that's also why we started with smart city and smart urbanism, our topic today. But we really want to turn this into a quarterly series where we target and tackle these questions and really these tough questions. So, if you have any insights or anything for us afterwards, let us know. And just like one or two more words about WLab. So this is a project by Club Wheelock and The Dew. So if you're turning in outside of Hong Kong, Club Wheelock is one of the biggest property developers in Hong Kong, and The Dew is there to really help companies to be more purposeful and really be able to tackle these changes of the 21st century, from transforming a business to also helping with employee mindsets or also innovative spaces. So WLab was really created by Club Wheelock and The Dew. And without further ado, if you're in Hong Kong, please check out our space and also our upcoming activities. And so stay tuned. And thank you so much, Patricia, for moderating today.
Thank you so much, Belinda. It's a pleasure for us as well to have you here. And let's start immediately actually with the panel, because you will see the hour will pass by very quickly, and I'm sure that there is so much knowledge to be shared. So thank you, Moitz and Marcelo, for joining us actually from Europe, for taking the time during the day and being with us. Belle, thank you so much as well to join us from actually Singapore, the #1 smart city in the world of the Smart City Index. Let's see how Marcelo and Boyd think about it, if they agree with the status or not. We will challenge the status later. In any case, I would like to give you all actually the chance to introduce yourself, because you have so amazing bios that I wouldn't say enough actually of your profiles. Let's start with the lady as well. Belle, can you please introduce yourself to us?
Hi, everyone. Very good to see all of you. And I really hope that one day I can come over to Hong Kong to see everyone in person. Really miss the personal touch. Over here in Singapore, we started Bus AR probably more than 3 years ago. Prior to that, we started another VR company. So all in all, it's about 6 years we are in AR, VR business. And definitely, it's really interesting for us, interesting time, because the take-up rate in Singapore, as what Belinda and Patricia just mentioned, like the government, it's really pushing the smart city applications to all businesses. So we have very good take-up rates from government to private institutions. In fact, one of my clients have just signed 5 years contract and renewed a multi-year commitment with us for deploying augmented reality in one of the biggest venues. I think, so they will be launching in the next few months. I really look forward to learn from everyone. I will be sharing more towards what we are doing, like AR for venues and in a smart city, how it helps us, both in China and Singapore. Looking forward to learn from all of you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you so much. Gentlemen, I can see Marcelo is already unmuted. Can you please introduce yourself? Thank you.
Thanks, Patricia. Great to be here. And I'm based in Switzerland, and it is a busy day, but it's also a great pleasure to be here. I'm more concerned about Boyd because the Mobile World Congress is going on in Barcelona. He must be incredibly busy right now. So that shows how important this event is for all of us, taking the time aside for that. And just quickly to wrap my background, I like doing pioneering stuff, right? I'm a member of the Explorers Club in New York. And other members are the first people in the world to go to the North Pole, South Pole, top of the Everest, bottom of the ocean, and to walk on the moon. So we have the Global Exploration Summit in Lisbon next week. And we'll be meeting people like from the Cousteau family and many more. So the pioneering spirit for me is really important. I was there at the very beginning when digital television was a thing, like the conversion from analog to digital. That was literally in the last millennium, right? We started those projects in 1998 in the cable space in London, and now it's a reality everywhere around the world. And what happened from that stage is getting to massive scale Wi-Fi networks, which is how I became a smart cities expert to the United Nations and got to meet Boyd a few years ago. I had a great pleasure. Rest assured, he's one of the world's foremost experts in whatever he's working with. So we're pretty safe here. And the last thing that is worth mentioning is that I'm also very early in cryptocurrencies and blockchain. Right? I got my first Bitcoin in 2013, sadly only one.
Wow, then you actually can retire already.
Well, my focus is not on day trading, is more into trying to build the industry. So it's a slightly different angle. But I've been working in the space for a very long time. So my main focus when I'm doing talks tends to be blockchains in the context of smart cities. And I think that this is how I can add most value here today.
Thank you so much, Marcelo. Yes, the Explorers Club actually, once they've heard here in Hong Kong that you're actually speaking on this panel, this message actually was distributed all over the places. So it's really, yeah, it is a very strong community. I definitely can say that. So thank you so much. Boyd, thank you so much as well for taking the time and being with us on this panel, although there is such a huge event going on in Barcelona. Muchas gracias.
De nada. Bueno, si quiere hablamos en castellano, ¿no?
I haven't drink that much.
Unlike Marcelo, I haven't been to the bottom of the ocean or the top of Everest. I do mountain bike a lot in Barcelona, but I don't know if that counts. And I haven't been to Hong Kong yet either, unfortunately. I have spent a lot of time around the world living and traveling to cities and countries. I spent 20 years, really, since I got my PhD, focused on sustainable innovation and smart cities. I used to study Hong Kong, Singapore, and many other cities and benchmark them against each other and other cities worldwide to try to identify, leveraging a tool I created, the Smart Cities Wheel, and an index to sort of understand the comparable aspects of smart cities around the globe. One of those aspects is mobility, and over the last 3 years, I've been focused exclusively on smart mobility in urban areas, but as well regional and intercity sustainable mobility, and how leveraging technologies like IAMOB, which is our company, we have a platform that allows seamless door-to-door mobility with rail operators, with transit agencies, and energy companies who want to offer sustainable multimodal mobility to their end users. So our platform is used for that, and keen to dive deeper into smart mobility and anything else you want to talk about today.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you so much. We are definitely looking forward. And yes, we have been sharing as well in our newsletters your wheel, because it has been used in the Hong Kong Smart City report. And it was very interesting to see as well the indicators, the 6 indicators. And I was always wondering, how is that actually compared to the donuts economics wheel that is represented? But we will get to this in a few minutes. So let's dive immediately into the questions, because I can see that a lot of people are joining us. Thank you so much as well. Again, please feel free to share your questions in the chat. Hopefully we will be able to answer all the questions, and they are all the questions that are possible. So please feel free to do so. Good. So SDG 11, the whole tonight, actually, or today as well, our webinar is focused on smart urbanism, if this is an utopian, or is it actually a survival vision for 2030? What are we going to? Where are we heading to? SDG 11, sustainable cities and communities, is actually quite a wide concept. So the success of engaging the smart city applications in moving society towards effective, resilient communities involves dynamic collaborations between city and the government, technology companies, app developers, and mainly, especially the communities. So what does it mean? I've seen as well some of the interviews of our speakers, some of the events that they have shared, or TED Talks. And you can very much see that the most important part out of it is actually the trust of the community towards the government and the policymakers. So having said this, gentlemen, as I said, smart city is a quite wide subject. So which areas of smart city are of your interest? Boyd or Marcelo, please feel free.
It's hard to narrow down to one because there is no smart city if there's not more of a holistic approach to improving quality of life, inclusive access to opportunity, sustainability. They're all intertwined. My core focus is mobility, but what does mobility do for people? It allows them access to jobs, to culture, to engage and interact with other people in society. Presumably, it does so in a more sustainable way to reduce their environmental impact as our cities grow and our regions grow. It impacts quality of life in a very profound way. So is mobility by itself like a category that is isolated from everything else in a city? No, it's a fundamental part of it, just like an urban plan penetrates everything that happens in a city and our lives. So I lean towards mobility because my company is focused on making sustainable mobility accessible, but I'm interested in the whole theme of cities, how we live and how we work.
Marcelo, how about you?
Yeah, I'd just like to refer to your point of utopia or not, and it is utopic by definition, right? SDG 11 is saying more sustainable, more inclusive, more resilient, safer. It's an infinite curve. Like you can keep on going and improving it in a very minute way. And the point that kind of when you reverse that equation is cities are already smart. You're just trying to make them smarter, and you want to accelerate the speed of adoption. You want to reduce the costs, and not only the costs of implementation, but also the costs of what do you do with all the trash of the previous generation of telecommunications equipment that is being deployed in the field and cannot be recycled, right? So lots of elements that people have to understand in terms of it's not about achieving a goal, it's the continuous improvement and how quickly you're moving in that direction. And paying attention to certain things that sort of vanish from the public eye, such as the very first city Wi-Fi project happened, if I'm not mistaken, back in the early 2000s, right? I think it was the Philadelphia project. There was a book written about that, super interesting. It was a flop, a failure, pick your F word when you want to describe it. But what happens is, even though you didn't have the mobile phones to make use of that infrastructure, you didn't have enough people aware of the value that could be unleashed by using such pathways to communicating better. The infrastructure that they built at a very high price back then eventually became a plan B for city services. They didn't throw it away. So all of a sudden, even though it didn't serve its purpose, a little bit like when you talk about Bitcoin as a cryptocurrency, it isn't, but it managed to find a niche, right? So those Wi-Fi infrastructures from the very early days, they transformed. And the transformation element is absolutely key. When you're trying to find people to invest the money, you need to show them, look, this is plan A. If you don't quite get there, here's plan B, here's plan C, and you're going to find more investors, not only in terms of money, but also in terms of time and efforts to be able to participate in that movement.
Thank you. That makes absolutely as well sense. It is definitely always a question of, I mean, I've been listening as well to your previous interviews. I can really highly recommend your TED Talk and the interviews actually about smart city, what it is and what it takes. And it's always a way of trying with everything that we have for all the ideas that are coming. Belle, I know that, I mean, AR in smart urbanism, that is a huge thing. So can you please walk us through as well, how can AR, the augmented reality, help smart urbanism, and what your expectations are with regards to the use of it? What are the consequences of it?
Yeah, sure. I really love how Marcelo and Boy mentioned about the adoption, and also overall, it's not so much of creating this goal. We are all working towards this goal in one way or another. I really love that because I do see that from our current work, like the AR perspective. So when we first rolled out augmented reality back in 2018, back then, most of the people, their first exposure, it was still games. So the very famous Pokemon Go, for good or for bad, most of the mobile phones today, for example, there are from the research, there are about 3 to 5 billion mobile phones today. The first exposure, the first 500 million exposure, it's all through Pokemon Go. So this is also why our work for most of our venues currently, it's more targeting on the millennials, and you can perceive it to be quite cartoonish, just like my virtual background. Why? Because we feel like the city as a whole is not only infrastructures or network. We must first integrate it to every human. And I believe in the power of youth. I believe in millennials. I believe in young people. This is why I want to start early and build our work to be so intuitive to a younger generations. It could be quite different as compared to some of our competitors, be it in China or around the world. But I really love what Nintendo has, for example, like through Pokemon Go, through Niantic has set and led the wave to roll out more games, even though they learn it through games. But after that, like what our work in some of our venues, so our work, we deploy AR wayfinding at Marina Bay Sands. So the whole 200,000 square meter venues is empowered by our wayfinding functions. So as opposed to the current way of experiencing wayfinding, people go to the board, then they try to remember the route, and they probably just go along. But ours is quite intuitive. Everything is just through mobile phone. And if you just drop off, you can always come back again to access to the same to the same venues that you are trying to find. So all that is done because I work first at Marina Bay Sands as their employee. So I encountered firsthand when you navigate around a big space, how hard it is if, let's say, you don't really have something that is so intuitive, like an extension of your body to help you. So all in all, I am all in, and I agree that we should really co-create by increasing the adoption rate.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yes, it's a very interesting actually what you are saying as well. I mean, yes, on one side, I can remember the Pokemon time and how everyone was actually on the streets. The good positive part was that everyone started moving much more, and they were actually outside. However, I remember as well that recently the World Economic Forum has posted an article published where they were talking about Singapore making actually for it's available and possible for everyone to be only 10 minutes walk away from parks, green places, that they can actually have a little bit of the nature or of the green parts around them. So I'm really curious how this will resonate with each other, with the AR, with the technology, and there is so much to learn about it. Which brings me actually to another part, because we are talking about smart cities. We are talking about smart urbanism. What does it actually mean? What is the difference of it? What does it actually mean in the first place? Boyd, maybe you want to contribute to this one.
The smart cities concept has been around for more than a dozen years. I think, originally it was a very technocentric view of cities. Maybe 5 years ago, I started reflecting on the evolution of smart cities and how we were defining it and thinking about it in society and in cities. And I came up with a sort of way of thinking about it that Generation 1.0 smart cities was very technology driven. tech companies pushing their technology on cities, early pioneering cities, wishing to be seen as pioneers, trying things without knowing if they would work or if it was a good thing or not. Then 2.0 was, I call it sort of cities-led, technology-enabled. So there was much more about cities now taking ownership rather than tech companies pushing their solutions, cities starting to form their own strategies and thinking about what it is they need and want for their city, where the gaps in the marketplace, which is kind of where the Smart Cities wheel emerged to provide that tool to benchmark yourself against other cities and yourself, and then figure out where your weaknesses are, and then create strategies to resolve those gaps in your vision. And then 3.0, I call it sort of co-creation with citizens, and it's very citizen-centric, bottom up, and much more focused on happiness and quality of life than on tech for tech. So in fact, of the 3 generations, that's the only one that has no reference to the word technology in the framing of it. So if you ask me today, sort of my own personal thinking on the evolution of smart cities is that I think more and more commonly people think about it as a mindset of sort of embracing innovation and embracing co-creation with citizens. And sometimes that results in cool tech that makes people's lives better, and sometimes has nothing to do with technology.
I think it's quite fair. And I mean, the different cities have different objectives, obviously, and different kind of priorities. And even though you came with the amazing wheel of the 6 indicators, unfortunately, it's not really always very even distributed, the projects. Nevertheless, at least there is something. So that's a very beautiful thing. I know that that Marcelo has actually as well talked in other interviews that he has been giving about the Ukrainian project or the Rio de Janeiro project, how important it is the citizen-centric approach to smart city. Marcelo, do you have anything to add to this, or how do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, both the Rio projects and the Ukraine project are interesting in their own ways. But my favorite's still a very, very old project out of Belgium, in which an upset citizen, maybe 10 years ago, I can't quite recall, decided to code an app that would allow people to take a picture of a pothole, because Brussels is full of potholes, even though it's a very wealthy city. And people could then vote, right? They could say, this pothole is not the biggest, but it's the most annoying, is the one destroying the highest number of car suspensions. So people could, with the technology that would go around with GPS and everything else would have in the background, they could take that picture, it had the geotagging, and then the government could get this information, say, hey, now we know which ones we should fix first, right? So they had an overwhelming problem that became manageable, or at least became more efficient, because a private citizen decided to do that. And it became a government initiative. I just love the spirits, the way that happened in the first place. And I would like to see more of those, right? Not every citizen is capable of coding something. Many of those solutions exist already, done by professionals. So it starts becoming less relevant as we advance in terms of deployment, but the spirit really counts. And the one thing I'd like to make mention to here is that the ideal smart city is a place where you don't really realize it's smart. It's just invisible, right? I don't know who said, I can't recall the name of the person, it was not me, but technology sufficiently advanced is undistinguishable from magic, right? It just happens. And the framework that I use for that is TV and remote controls, right? TVs used to be extremely complex. Remote controls did not exist at the very beginning. You had lots of buttons. And then all of a sudden now, you have Apple TV as one example out of many, with very few buttons, and it kind of guesses what you want to watch next, right? So you have the AI engine and everything else going on. The complexity didn't disappear. It just shifted into the back end so that it looks like magic from the perspective of the user. So I'll see more and more projects make our lives more magical, and allow, and AR is a fantastic example of that, because you have so much hard work being done in the background, creating so much value for the end users. So I'd like to have more and more of those magical experiences where you go like, I don't know how it works. I'm just really happy it does.
That's a very good example. Thank you so much. And yes, technology, I mean, it's a matter of time. It's really going so fast. I can remember like it was like almost like 5 years ago that I used to have a Walkman and CD-ROM and all this kind of stuff. And yes, and right now we are talking about AR and virtual realities and machine learnings and AI implementations in the smart city. So it's really like 2 decades that are actually in between, and yet we have a completely new perspective and a new reality. And I definitely believe as well that COVID has contributed to a completely new perspective and perception of a city, the interaction between the citizens and the companies that started actually providing already different kind of solutions to existing problems or new race problems. So I have a question to you, Bella, as well. How do you think has COVID changed the trajectory of smart cities, and how are cities reacting to COVID and rethinking their areas of focus, for instance, for investment opportunities as well?
Okay. I think overall, at least from our perspective, is that COVID has accelerated the whole space. People, I have people that come to me like, they will mention stuff like, just give me AR. So to the point, like just now, it's quite interesting that currently everyone it's co-creating it so much so that they just want it so badly. So it's to me, it's I look at it as it's like a string that. But when this happened, I do think that we need to have some balance when it comes to pushing out all these technologies. So I definitely believe that we should reach the stage 3 where we listen from the people, because currently, be it in Singapore or in China, our work is more towards the combination of AR and AI, where we leverage on some of the data that we interact with the people, consented data, to really not pushing them what we want, but it's also listening to them, what makes them feel more easy, basically comfortable, the smart applications, how it fit in. So I guess for the investment space, I'm not exactly the best person to say it, because we actually bootstrap the business from 0 to 4 million without much external funds. So everything is almost like a founder's own, basically is revenue. So, but I was quite fortunate to work with one of the biggest names, so Alibaba affiliate. Cloudbay is their big data arm. Through that arm, we have access to about 49.6 million people in one of their province. That taught me a lot on how government and also public sector is planning to roll out smart applications. So unlike last time, like technology company is pushing it, right now government with certain level of consented data, they are pushing out very, very smart data that overall it really elevates everyone's lives. So I'm very blessed to learn from both the governments in Singapore and in China. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. That's a very interesting perspective as well. Boyd, how do you see actually how COVID has influenced the smart city success, and what kind of opportunities are there?
I think it's a little early to assess the medium to long-term impact of COVID on sort of the trajectory of smart cities. You know, I think generally what we're seeing, thankfully, is a growing consensus around sustainability and climate, and how our society, our economies, and our cities are detracting from our need to radically accelerate the path to zero. I think, there was a lot of worry. For example, people were going to go back to, we called it Carmageddon, where everyone was going to want to be back in their cars to avoid being around other people. Obviously, there are some fundamental shifts in how people think about where they want to live and where they want to work. People are now worried about the next pandemic and wanting to have green space near them in case they get quarantined. They want balconies in cities. But at the same time, another thing that I've been very encouraged about is a lot of cities, at least in our space and mobility, they took the window of time and this sort of like free pass to rethink some key fundamental aspects of urban life, particularly around the urban planning and the availability of active travel corridors. So you look at a lot of cities around the world. I think Europe generally took the lead here, but you've seen some examples in other parts of the world too, where cities just retook over streets that were dedicated to cars and said, you know what, the city is for people, not for cars. And to get people from going back to the car in high levels, what we need to do is create better alternatives and connect active travel corridors with micromobility and public transit networks. And cities initially did some experiments, like Milan did an experiment where I think they took like 30 kilometers of public streets out from cars and dedicated it to people mobility. And at the time, it was like an experiment that was supposed to last 3 months or 6 months during COVID. And then they say, this is working so well, we're just going to do this permanently. So I'm on the optimistic side that I think COVID made people at an individual scale and cities at a city scale rethink what we're doing, rethinking our urban planning, prioritizing creating green space and access for people to move around in a more safe and clean way. So in that regard, I'm optimistic.
Thank you. I love very much your positivity. Marcelo, how do you see the impacts of COVID on the whole concept of smart cities, and how is actually it reacting or rethinking the areas for investment opportunities?
Well, I think you have some minor nuisances, especially from the angle of mobility, where you don't have as much data, right? So not so many people moving around, but that could also be positive, because then you can compare high flux with low flux of people and how the systems cope accordingly. But at that level of technical detail, I think that this is not a major concern. The plus side that lots of people forget or neglect to mention is that we put governments all around the world in a really, really tight spot. Basically, they could not ask citizens to show up at an office to get the third stamp and have the fifth interview for whatever service they should be getting on their mobile phone. So they had to get their act together. Like, I'm based in Switzerland, and they literally sent everybody home, and they worked like crazy to try to digitize as many processes as possible. And they're very good at it, being in Switzerland, having a lot of money and access to development talents. But this happened all around the world. Like, I think even in the poorest countries, you had to figure out a way of saying, email is fine. Don't come to the office, right? It's okay if you stay at home. And all of a sudden, this is going to stay. Like, there's no way we're going back to doing paperwork unless it's in the personal interest of someone who makes money out of slow and inefficient processes. And that tends not to be the case in the vast majority of places. People like efficiencies. And even if they are milking the system because they are in a gateway position where they can make money out of slowing things down, they'll figure out another way to make money, from the existing systems and the ones that are going to evolve in the future. So this is absolutely fantastic, and people don't mention that. I haven't seen any papers coming out saying how much more efficient those processes have been over the last few months, and what is the forecast for the future. So you end up in from the investment perspective, what tends to happen is, ideally, governments shouldn't be involved too much. Right? They should definitely be involved enough. They have to facilitate the acceleration process. They have to be there and saying, here's our stamp of approval, great initiative. Maybe that comes with some money, maybe not. Maybe it comes with office space, whatever the package is available. But what you really want to do is to get those solutions that are bubbling up. Like, it's an emergence scenario. Now, people basically identify a problem, like this Belgian citizen in Brussels saying potholes are really annoying, let me do something about it. And the role of the government is just to facilitate that flow up to the point in which it's investment grade. Right? In Eastern countries, you tend to have governments that you could call autocratic, but you could also call them highly efficient. Like they don't count so much on 4 to 5 year election cycles, so they can really plan for the future. So if they say this makes sense, but it takes 10 years, like let's start yesterday, because it will take 10 years for us to have the optimum output. So this is what I hope that will happen. People are going to realize governments are now digitized on a much higher level. We have access to open data in many circumstances, so people can just go there and tap into those pools of information and try to come up with novel solutions solving real life problems. And then the government will just kind of gently nudge and guide them towards the point in time in which investors want in. And that's when your flywheel starts spinning really fast, because you have the flow of money coming into the system, which is what's happening with blockchain solutions at the moment. It took 10 years for big investors to say, hey, this now makes sense. I can make a lot of money within the time frames of my fund. And that's when you start having the real change. But I'd say brownie points for governments that managed to pull off all the rabbits from their magic hats. Some did that better than others, but I think every single government worked so hard to make sure that this became a reality, and that, I also hope that it will continue in the future.
Definitely, I can definitely see that. And you have mentioned several points that I would like actually to touch base on, and I'm gonna try to keep it short as well. But yes, one thing, for instance, what you said as well was, I know that in Helsinki, they came up with a project where they had trash bins, and they have just placed enough space so people that wanted to throw away cans, aluminium cans, they could actually place it around it. So homeless people could collect it and then actually redeem it. It's really a whole life cycle. So yes, you're right. There are actually government can then suggest some solutions provided, and then at the end of the day, it is actually the community that is helping and is contributing to it. What did you said? Yes, it is changing. COVID is coming to a more virtual environment and new reality. So getting actually into this part. I'm actually very concerned as well for the youth nowadays, if they actually will know or they ever know what it is to handwrite or a letter or something like this. So that's a very huge thing, because most of them are conducting their classes in school on Zoom or basically on their computer. So that works out. But I know as well that this has actually a huge impact on mental health. And mental health is I think that this definitely goes hand in hand. And I can see in the chat that Natalie and Kenneth has actually it's already on that. And I think the point of Kenneth where he can only be as our emotional state allows it is and speaks for itself. And here I would like actually to read up Natalie, where she says, thank you speakers for the inspiring remarks. As a youth climate advocate, hooray, well done Natalie as well. I echo strongly point of believing in youth and code and develop ideas. I wonder if there are new movements in smart urbanism that focuses on youth inclusion and empowerment. Who would like to answer this one?
I can answer this. Yeah, so as a matter of fact, like today, this afternoon, I was just speaking with a group of 60 over students. They are ranging from 13 to 18, and it's Intel AI youth engagement. So, I mean, I learned so much from them. It really propels me to even like double down on what we are doing. So for the first 3 years, we augment places. So we have all this, putting out all this cartoonish work at different venues. But we, my co-founder and the whole team, we have intentionally said that for the next 3 years, we want to, of course, we want to engage with the youth and by augment phases. So next month, we are actually rolling out our own mobile app. It's called Happy Tune. So that is really the main reason, is really to tackle these soft factors that like some of you are talking about. Mental issues is accelerating, especially during this pandemic. Even as a matter of my own experience, like my dad is actually suffering end-stage disease, and we are physically apart because I have to work here and he stay back home. So it's a lot of hard time. I probably is just one of them. Like, I believe that there are so many souls out there that are affected by pandemic. So for the next 3 years, I'm just going to double down and keep rolling out applications that make people happy and healthy. That is really our goal. So yes, a big yes that we will be rolling out more smart urbanisms applications that target to make people happy.
Yay! Happy to hear that. Marcelo, I know that you are actually working with such a project right now. Can you share a little bit more with us about it?
Yeah, so as you can see, like I'm peddling my nonprofit, Wisdom Accelerator for Youth. We have monthly online sessions via the site neoway.org that you can see on the screen. And we're trying to make teenagers wiser faster, right? And this also includes mental health and trying to have more self-awareness. Teenagers have suffered much more than younger children with the pandemic, not only because they had to work harder to get the grades, and many of them actually missed out on lots of materials, but also because they get their social say satisfaction from peers. Kids that are below 12, they tend to get a lot of that from the immediate family, mom, dad, and siblings, right? So all of a sudden the teenagers were yanked from their reality. They are usually not very self-confident in the majority of cases, and all of a sudden they can't even read social clues. Everything is messaging. So there is a very large component of mental health that needs to be taken care of, and becoming wiser hopefully is one of the paths in their journey to move in this direction. And the advantage that teenagers bring to smart cities, and I'm not dealing with teenagers as, oh, poor things, how can we help them? It's like, no, how can we help them help themselves, right? So if you have teenagers appreciating value, and that is definitely something that they can find out very quickly with a smartphone application that makes sense from their perspective. TikTok being the classic example, right? So it's just spread like wildfire all around the world, and it got into the highest political levels of debate because it became so relevant. So you just need to make sure that teenagers are given the opportunities to leverage their capabilities, and by having more meaning in their lives, right? By doing things that generate value for themselves and for their inner circles, they will be in the future in a much better position to create value for society. So I think we should enable them, give those enablement tools that would allow them to understand what is a sense of purpose, and therefore have better choices in the future.
Definitely. I can see that as well in Europe, especially, that a lot of teenagers are more actually right now very sustainable focused, and they have some of them have actually already anxieties in terms of, as you said as well, with the mental health part, but they have the anxieties in terms of global warming, or in terms of where the cities are moving towards which parts. And on the other side, you can see that a lot of teenagers are actually more interested in secondhand fashion, and they are actually more and more becoming a vegetarian. They're more and more becoming aware of actually everything that is really promoted by the SDGs, and how we can actually become to a, well, maybe not a completely full carbon emission free place, but a better place and a happier place. So I definitely believe as well that there is a lot of education, but I know that in Spain and Barcelona, there are a lot of movements. Boyd, have you already seen as well, like, what is the impact on the youth?
Yeah, we actually, I was involved with some work I was doing around the transition from smart cities to thinking about it from a happy citizen perspective in Barcelona. And we did some projects with the United Nations in Barcelona around youth. One of our collaborators led the work, for example, of a design thinking co-creation sessions with youth in Barcelona, where you would give them tools and materials to create and innovate, but you'd give them a challenge, like present a graphical view with 3D materials of what your future city would look like. What would you like Barcelona to look like in the future? Or how would you like to move around the city in the future? And it was just, you know, inspiring to see children probably as young as 5 or 6 coming up with very smart ideas. And I think we all know this by our own experiences, observing other children, is that, you know, they're much more innovative and creative than we are as adults. And they're extremely attuned to things that a lot of society, not the ones who are on this call, but a lot of our fellow citizens have kind of lost that concern about our impact on nature and society, and they get caught up, depending on where they are in the world, in socioeconomic levels and various other things, but they tend to lose sight of some of these very important things around humanity and the planet, whereas the youth, it's front and center and it's every day. I mean, my daughter's 9, and we created this little like fictitious company between us called Recircle, and it's all about like finding materials that could be reconstituted and even become a product. And we name the product and we build these little versions and just put them in the house just for fun, really. But it was really inspired by her more than me. It's in their nature. I think what we need to do is harness that and probably give them more leadership roles than adults have.
Yes, that's a very, very good, actually, definitely a very good advice, because I can see as well, my daughter is only 3 years old, but I can see what they are already doing in Hong Kong with having kindergartens with STEAM and robotics, and how they are actually starting to build small robots in the age of 4. And I'm like, wow, your mom wouldn't be even able to know how to call that. So I'm totally actually flabbergasted of the generation. So I have to learn a lot. I thought that there is a huge gap between my parents and me, but I think that between me and my child, there will be even a bigger gap if I don't speed up my knowledge. But yes, thank you so much for sharing this. I'm actually as well, we have another question in the chat from Steve, and I'm definitely happy to ask this question. Unfortunately, I was kicked out of the thing, so I will have to check it soon. In the meantime, I wanted to ask you guys as well. Oh yeah, here it is. Okay, good. So we have Steve that has asked, I'm interested in the NEOM project to build a smart city in the Middle East from the ground up. Thoughts? They talk about building the first cognitive city where technology is used to act deeply with the population. Do you embrace the differentiation between a smart city and a cognizant one, or is this just a PR spin? Who would like to answer this question? Marcelo, you're smiling, so the microphone is yours.
I can jump in because a good friend of mine is a very senior executive in that project. So Saudi has to evolve, right? So they know that oil is becoming proportionately more expensive than renewable energies, and that's basically the death of oil. As soon as it's more expensive to dig it from the ground, no one is going to touch it. So we're getting to the point in which solar just makes more sense. And they know that, right? So they have to invest the money they have now to do things that make sense. This is not the first smart city projects they have. I'm not going to get into details, but have a look at Saudi Arabia smart city projects, and there are a couple of others that did not end so well, at least not according to the original plans. NEOM is quite different in the sense that it is being established in a region that is absolutely stunning. It's where you have the best diving in the Red Sea. It's or in Israel have Eilat, in Jordan have Aqaba, and of course Egypt has Sharm el Sheikh and Hurghada, who are very, very popular places with tourists. So location-wise, it makes sense. The weather is actually quite pleasant compared to the rest of the country. They do have the money, they do have the possibility to do things at scale and not worry about election cycles for pretty obvious reasons. And I think they have a good stab at doing what they're doing, but you have to try to decrypt the layer of political speak, right? What are the messages they're trying to impose from a geopolitical perspective? Which major corporations are guiding them into certain directions which are not necessarily the best for the overall development of the project? But these are all nuances, right? I think that in its core, it makes sense. That region is not very populated because nomadic tribes never had a good reason to be there. And they have huge momentum. So I get posts from my friend all the time. We're doing this, we're opening a TV studio, we're doing that. And I believe that they're not going to be able to achieve everything that I want to achieve, but considering how ambitious they are, that's not a bad thing at all. So what I usually say is, if you set out to run a marathon and you only run half, you haven't failed. You run half a marathon, and that's amazing. And it would be a great example by itself.
Yeah, I wish I would have run a half marathon. So that is a very good explanation as well. Which brings me actually to the part of how are actually smart cities evolving in different continents. I mean, you all have been traveling around, you have seen it, you are very much advocating it, living it, and executing the mission and the vision of smart cities, of the concept of helping and embracing the communities. How is it different? Like, what can you see? But you have actually, I mean, Hong Kong has actually really taken an example of your wheel that you have suggested for smart city and the indicators of it. But what is the biggest observation that you have?
It's obviously hard to generalize across a region, let alone even in one country. There's a lot of variation within the same country across cities. But as a general rule, North America has been slow, surprisingly so, given that it's so technocentric and capitalistic in its mentality. You would have thought that smart cities would have taken off first there, and they didn't. I think when you get under the layers of it and understand why, there's a lot of issues around political issues around bipartisan politics, hard to get national and state and city levels aligned around investing in these things. And also the cities are not really built well to deploy smart city at scale because they're so spread out and sprawled, and they generally have very bad public transit systems, making car dependence very high and creating more frictions to deploy smart city at scale. Latin America, I spent 3.5 years living there and working a lot in the smart city space. They're behind. I think they're behind because they're starting behind in terms of level of development and access to capital for investing in scalable, smarter infrastructure. But there are pockets of innovation, not always all deep tech. Like Medellin is a great example of a city that's really embraced innovation from the bottom up, but not necessarily technology focused. So more of that 3.0 smart cities I talked about, more citizen co-creation, working with the lowest income people first to then sort of build the city up from the bottom up. And they've done some amazing stuff there. Whereas you see like in Rio and Santiago de Chile, there have been some more advanced technological deployments around transportation and smart information systems. Europe, I would say, has been, very early in a lot of the smart cities work. There's a lot of deviation across Amsterdam and Barcelona and Vienna and many other cities regarding how they deploy it. But they've kind of gone through that evolution of those three generations. And I think we're seeing a lot more of that 3.0 citizen-centric combined with smart strategies at the city level. Again, you have strong urban density and better infrastructure to support scaling smart cities. Asia, I think, Asia was very early in embracing technology and smart city evolution and continues to be a leader in the deployment of technology at scale for a range of things, whether that's transportation or video surveillance technologies and various other things. I think Asia, maybe kind of going back to Marcelo's point, that sometimes there's more of an autocratic sort of top-down approach. So they've deployed solutions that they hope citizens would embrace. Even going back to the point about Neom, the smart city, you saw a lot of these sort of ground up greenfield smart cities initiatives that didn't work in most cases because they're devoid of culture and the understanding of embedding people in the environment, that people are what makes cities, not just the hardware and the tech and the infrastructure. But I think Asia is rapidly coming around to a bit more of a holistic approach. If you look at Hong Kong or Singapore, many other cities over the last 3 years, you've seen a lot more focus on engaging with people, with a startup ecosystem, with other actors in a sort of more co-creative model.
Thank you so much, and I'm sure that it is a very interesting perspective to compare all the countries, given either the cultural backgrounds or the differences in the usage of technology, obviously as well other components that play a huge role in it. Marcelo, I remember from your interviews you have been sharing as well with us, in these interviews you have been sharing different approaches. How do you see what are the major differences, or what were you amazed by? What was the biggest project that amazed you?
Right. We talked about the sense of community before, right? So the smaller the group of people involved, the more likely it is that you're going to get to sustainable results. So we have something called the Dunbar number. Many people are familiar with that. It's around 150 people that can compose a community. If you go much beyond that, you end up splintering into group A, group B, and so on. So the smaller countries or regions tend to be very powerful from that perspective, right? You can definitely create a solution that is extremely well adapted for the Singapore reality. And all of a sudden people start paying attention, say, how can I adapt that? So I do see most of those successful pioneering projects coming from countries like Singapore, or regions like Hong Kong. And then other countries can try to foster some of those elements. But Boyd is absolutely right. Like, to build a new metro line in New York, it costs 5 times more per mile than it costs to do the same thing in Paris. And in Paris, you have extremely challenging forces that increase prices, like strong unions, obviously a very old city, and everything needs to be done according to EU regulations. I mean, New York manages to do that by 5x. So you can have the best technology in the world. If it costs so much to deploy it that it doesn't make any sense, it will never happen, right? To just be something that is for show, like a window dressing, saying, hey, this is a desirable future, but you don't have the fundamentals in place. So in the case of the US, I would say fundamentals are key. I would like to mention the Rio smart city platform, because I did talk about that. It's quite open information that the reason why Rio is so advanced in terms of smart cities technology is because we had an enormous problem with floods a few years before the Olympic Games and the World Cup. So they had to accelerate the planning, and IBM pretty much donated their solution. Like the whole backend, I suppose, lots of integration as well, was free, right? So they wanted to have a case study, and Rio, because of those major international events, was the perfect place for IBM to say, hey, we did that. So it is not a poor country, is not a small city without a budget, but it would have been very, very difficult for Rio to achieve something down to that scale with that level of efficiency without those stars being aligned. And I mention stars because that's my background, so that's kind of the expression that comes to mind. But I think that governments should try to figure out which stars can we align to build our own constellation, and they're all going to be unique, and they're going to be evolving into the future.
That's a very interesting perspective. And I think that this is indirectly as well already an answer to one of the questions that we have had here. Unfortunately, we won't be able to cover all the questions because we are already over the time, so I'm really sorry. I would like to give all the speakers one more sentence to leave us with, what is it? Smart urbanism. Is it an utopian or a survival vision for 2030? Belle. Well, I think you have to unmute yourself. Yes.
For us, it's a work in progress. So, so much work that has been done, be it from the public sector or the private sector. At least here in Singapore, the government is really very progressive and they do listen to the citizens, at least for the work that we are doing in this space. We work with Singapore Land Authority, so you can tell like the government is really listening to what the citizen wants. It's not so one-sided or silo as maybe other states are. So we are quite fortunate in that sense. So for me, it's work in progress for sure.
Very good answer. That's like in the middle. Thank you. I truly believe it is as well. Right. What is it for you? Utopian or survival vision for 2030?
Well, I don't think there's much of an alternative, depending on how you define it. We certainly have to be smarter, and nobody wants to live in a dumb city.
Love it. Marcelo.
I would just like to pick a word that is engagement, right? So if governments are listening, but the citizens are not saying anything, no, you don't get the results. So you need to also confront this social political realities of certain places where it is expected from you to be loud and make yourself heard. Belgium being a case, so the citizen decided to fix a pothole problem by being proactive, and that really worked, and it created a beautiful momentum. It was very positive. In other places, people were like, oh, no, the nail that sticks the highest get hammers first, right? So you have to make sure that you create an environment where people can propose novel solutions. And I'm coming from a place of decentralization, right? The blockchain industry is all about empowering people, no matter how tiny they are, as a part of the community, to have their voice and to be part of the solution. So I think that people should engage as much as they can within their environment, respecting, of course, the limitations, the context of what they have to face. But they have to understand that it doesn't happen without someone doing something about it, and that someone should be everyone.
Very beautifully said. And with this, I would like to finish and wrap up our panel and our webinar tonight or today, wherever you are actually sitting, in which time zone. I would like to say thank you so much for sharing it. As I said, we could go on and on. I mean, I haven't even asked you other two questions that I had prepared. So it's a huge pity, but nevertheless, I would like to say thank you so much. Please, everyone, stay tuned as well. We will have a newsletter that will be coming out with the recording of this webinar, so you can share it with everyone who couldn't make it tonight. And we will as well engage you and share with you the WhatsApp group that we have created for Smart City. Everyone who wants to join us, who wants to talk about the projects that are happening, who wants to share their knowledge. And I know that there were actually, I've just received as well a private message from somebody from India that has said that they have amazing ideas actually, how to contribute and how to merge the smart city challenges with the mental well-being part. So as you can see, there is a lot of knowledge in the society, in the communities. The only thing is we need to get together and work and share our knowledge and talk to each other. And I think that this is what makes us much stronger, and our future for our new generations as well, gives them a better foundation. With this, thank you so much, everyone, for joining and being there. Marcelo, Boyd, Belle, thank you so much for your precious time. And I can't wait for having actually more meetings like this as well. And we will be organizing as well quarterly meetup groups with international speakers exactly on the smart city challenges, just to brainstorm. So feel free, stay tuned, like our pages as well. And thank you so much. And we wish you all the best. Thank you.